You're watching a reality check exclusive. The latest growth numbers, which showed that India has hit the lowest growth in over 4 decades, is an indication of the huge challenges before the government as they battle to revive a faltering economy, even as the threat of the virus still remains and India's vaccine drive appears shaky. Joining us tonight on the show to talk us through these challenges and how the government hopes to tackle it is Rajiv, Kumar, the Vice Chair of NITI Aayog. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, for joining us. Now, I just want to start by asking you, the growth numbers in that sense were not that surprising. We knew the numbers are not going to look good. But given the fact, as I mentioned, that the threat of the virus has not abated, our vaccination program is looking somewhat wobbly, how worried are you? How worried should we be and how worried are you?
Hello, Vasu. Good to be here. And may I sort of start by saying that it would be good to say that the Indian numbers have, Indian GDP has achieved this, has the lowest growth ever since, because the global economy has also achieved its lowest growth since the Great Depression.
Yes.
So you have to put that in that context, because otherwise, the fear, the danger is that the audience will think that we are an exception, which we are not. And so that's the first thing. The second one is that I need to clarify that the vaccination program, I'm not sure what you use is wobbly. I'm not. So that's not my impression. My impression is that the government is very sharply focused on it. Is trying to do whatever it can and will do whatever is required, having been taken by complete shock and surprise with the ferocity of the second wave. Now, having said that, just to put the thing in the right context, the GDP numbers that have come out had shown that the economy was recovering from the pandemic faster than most people had expected. And the fourth quarter number of 1.6% was a very, is a very good indicator of that economic momentum being restored. But of course, that's been cut short, as it were, by the second round of the pandemic. So I'm hoping that this has already peaked. Economic activity will begin in June as the lockdowns are retreat, as the lockdowns are taken back. And I would want to hazard estimated guess that our GDP numbers for 21-22 will still be in double digits, and that those agencies and individuals who have been lowering their estimates in the recent weeks as the pandemic is unfolded will, I'm quite convinced, be revising them upwards.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, because of course you're right to say, and I'll come to the vaccine question later and why I called it shaky. But let me ask you this, that you're right to say that the growth is falling the world over. Every economy is being hit by the pandemic. But the concern here, and in fact this has become almost a political accusation, is that our government has mismanaged it, and that's why we are bearing the brunt of it even worse. You are talking of an optimistic scenario where things start to improve, but let me just point you to some of these findings that have emerged. Can I just finish? Can I just finish quickly? Let me just
I don't think the word mismanaged is the right word to use.
Okay.
Because the intensity of our lockdown in the last wave in the first quarter of 2020, which is April to June, was a necessity given the state of our preparedness.
No, I'm not talking of the lockdown. Hold on.
Let's not use words, Devasu, to in some sense, put ideas and words in people's
Okay,
mouth.
let me clarify, because you didn't let me clarify. I think the point being made here is that the government said, of course, you needed to lock down, but you also needed to provide some kind of financial safety net to absorb the economic consequences of locking down. And the government announced a series of packages, Atmanirbhar 1, 2, 3, claiming that this would absorb the pain. But if you look at all the findings, let me just tell you what FICCI said. FICCI's Business Confidence Survey just came out yesterday, says Business confidence index has fallen from 74 to 51 points. Sharp drop in optimism levels of India Inc. Worsening conditions, muted expectations. COVID is surging. 70% participants reported weak demand.
So you're talking now today, or you're talking last year?
No, this is a report that has come out yesterday.
This has come out yesterday, and it clearly reflects the people's expectations, observations as a result of the surge in the number that we saw beginning in April and that 4-week period, and that's what is being reflected now. I must sort of I would like such a survey again to be taken in the middle of June or the end of June, when the numbers would start looking much better and the expectations would be very different. So to quote this number, one number to pass a judgment on the entire 500 days of this huge calamity that we have faced, that is imposed on us, I think is not right.
Okay, can I then share some other numbers with you? Because you're right that one number may not be sufficient.
Lasu, I want to give you a number. The Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing came out this morning. And if it is above 50, it reflects optimism. Last month, in April, the ones in April was 53. It's come down now, but it's still 50.4. And the Services Index, PMI, when it comes out a couple of days later, will probably show you the same thing.
Okay. Now, I'm saying this, that, okay, so when we talk of FICCI, when we talk of the Purchasing Managers Index, we're still talking in a sense of the formal economy. Let's look at what is happening to the informal economy, and let me put some more numbers before you. CMI, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, and Azim Premji University, these are their numbers. 97% of Indians, according to this survey, have reported becoming poorer during the pandemic. 1 crore job losses estimated between January to April of this year. 1 crore job losses alone in May this year is the estimate. 23 crore, that is 230 million people more, may have fallen into poverty during the pandemic.
So the contrasting numbers have been given out by Soumya Kanti Ghosh in a report out of the State Bank of India, which says that during 2021, last year, the Indian economy was the EPFO, the Employment EPFO Provision Fund Organization. Numbers show that the economy was adding 1 million jobs a month nearly. 10 million were added last year, which were a little lower than the year before, but were still being added. Now, the point is that, when the CMI gives out these numbers, they are asking the question, they look at unemployment numbers, right? So they're asking the question, are you employed? No. Are you looking for a job? Yes. And therefore you're unemployed. But the point is that could well be an answer to the question, to reflect the person being interviewed's aspirations for a better job. Now, Azim Premji University's numbers are very stark, have to be taken on board, and have been taken on board by the government, because otherwise the government wouldn't have gone out of its way to provide the food ration for 800 million people free of cost. And also the fact that the farmers and the marginal farmers have been given the transferred incomes to the Pradhan Mantri.
The PM Kisan transfer, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, the PM Kisan transfer is an ongoing scheme. The question that is being asked, let me finish the question and then you respond. Let me just finish the question. The question being asked is, the question being asked is that these huge amounts, the headline figures for these Atmanirbhar schemes or the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan package, 20 lakh crore, 3 lakh crore, 4 lakh crore, was in terms of cash out just a fraction. The government claimed 15% of GDP has been spent. Actually, almost every credible estimate has found that barely 1% of GDP has been spent. And many are saying that the reason for the fact that we have so many people slipping into poverty, into hunger, is because we are simply not spending enough in terms of putting money into people's pockets.
Vasu, all the votaries and who have been, I think, quite quite vocal on your channel of distributing what I call helicopter money, are missing the point, which is that in a situation where there are supply constraints, if you just distribute helicopter money in the hope that it will increase consumption, it's a completely false premise. And
Why?
it is the evidence, hang on, and evidence of that is that the deposits of the Jan Dhan accounts, which are about 400 million now, the deposits in those accounts have been increasing. Now, what does that show? That if you give the people at this point of time, for very good reasons, they increase their savings. They don't go out and spend. And if they don't spend, the economy will not get the stimulus. So therefore, what we thought was the best way to do was increase your employment in the infrastructure sector, in the real estate sector, in all the other sort of related activities, which are railways and so on.
Okay.
Because that is where you get a sustained increase in demand and in incomes, which will then sustain your recovery. And as I said, those having been taken, the recovery in the second half of last year, much stronger than what anybody expected, especially the helicopter money walas.
No, the helicopter money, when you say, by the way, helicopter money, you seem to use the term rather disparagingly. The government itself believes in direct cash transfers. As you mentioned, they've been doing that with PM Kisan. Number two, you know who suggested this very strongly just last week on my show was Uday Kotak. Now, I'm sure you wouldn't describe Uday Kotak as someone who's an advocate of helicopter money or a usual suspect or a member of the... He said, let me tell you what he said. He said, this is the time for the government to directly put cash in the hands of the people in the bottom 60–70%. He said, if it comes to it, the RBI should print cash to if there's a cash crunch. He said, if not now, when?
Well, that's Uday's view, and he was entitled to that. And as always, we are looking at all such views and all such suggestions with an open mind. And if it does come to, if we feel that that's required, that will surely be done, as was assured by no less than a person than the Honorable Finance Minister.
Okay.
Who said that
so now, okay, fair enough.
And that is required, but so far,
yes.
So just bear with me. But so far, as I said to begin with, if you distribute consumption money in a situation of supply side bottlenecks, you have the fear of stoking inflation, and which is why you need to keep your powder dry, so that when you do that, you can get a supply side response, which is what is required to get the economy back.
Okay. All right, fair enough. The powder dry argument, some would say, how long does one keep the powder dry? But fair enough. Let me ask you this, though, about the vaccination program. And you were saying, why would I call it shaky? Simply because, Mr. Kumar, as you're aware, we were averaging close to 30–34 lakh doses per day just a month ago. That fell less than half to 16 lakh doses in May. It's now started to pick up, but it fell by less than 50%. The city where you and I are sitting in Delhi has actually stopped vaccination for 18 to 45 because they don't have vaccines. So we clearly, so when one talks of recovery and one talks of bringing the economy back on track, for which you have to vaccinate, we are in the middle of a serious vaccine problem, are we not?
We are in the midst of a transitory problem because of the ferocity and the speed at which the second wave hit us. And this is certainly only a transitory problem. The government is hugely conscious of it. The government also recognizes very clearly that vaccinate is the way forward. Okay. And my very senior colleagues within NITI Aayog and outside in other ministries are mounting a daily vigil, as it were, on how to ramp up the production and the availability of the supplies. We have pulled out all stops in trying to get the supplies imported or produced domestically or to get the licenses.
Sure.
So it's a transitory problem, which I'm sure, as far as I know, you will see within 4 to 6 weeks.
Yes.
We'll over it, and the vaccination, which by the way reached a peak of 43 lakhs, 4.3 million
yes.
on a day in April, will go back to that level and we will see.
But Mr. Kumar, there are several questions here. I mean, it's very reassuring to know that this is being monitored closely at NITI and elsewhere. But there are several questions here. The first question is this entire dual pricing policy of having multiple prices for multiple stakeholders, which has come under a lot of criticism. Even the Supreme Court had questioned it or is questioning it. Do you believe that this was the right choice, the centre was on the right track in dual pricing, or is it time to now reverse it, because states are unable to directly procure, as you know?
Vasu, as you would be well aware, one doesn't comment on matters which are sub judice. So let me leave it at that.
Okay, but sub judice, it's only been in court since yesterday. The problem predates the entry of the court into the picture.
It's an ongoing thing, and as I said, let's leave it at that, because when the Honorable Supreme Court itself is engaged,
okay,
it's much beyond my pay grade.
Okay, fair enough. But you're saying that you are confident that the vaccine supplies are going to be ramped up, Mr. Kumar. But give us a sense of what exactly is the basis of that confidence, because the numbers that we have targeted seem enormous, that we'll vaccinate everybody by the end of the year.
My senior colleague, Dr. Paul, had actually put out a table in the public domain during a press conference that he said, where he gave out the numbers, and he gave out the numbers by the firms from which we were expecting and the months. And I direct you to that table. It's available in the public domain, as I said, and you will see there that those are based on very careful, very serious estimates that are being made on a very micro basis. So okay. It's not just a 60,000 feet statement. It's something which has been put out after due care by people who are actually very careful with what they say.
No, I've had a look at the numbers, sir, and that's where it's not quite adding up, because if the aim is, as the government has said, that they want to vaccinate every single Indian by the end of the year, we need to be vaccinating at the rate of about 1 crore a day, 1.15 crore to be specific. Right now, we're doing 24 lakhs a day. So we're talking of a 5-time jump, 4 to 5 time jump to be able to meet that target.
There are much better prepared and informed people to answer those questions. I'm not sure where those numbers are coming from.
Okay.
The point is that very clearly it will be the population above 18 which is the more material, which is the more important population, and then
yes.
the children will be allowed. But your 1.15 crore is actually just a simple arithmetic which comes out of 134 crores multiplied by 2 blocks.
Yes.
So those numbers are not, we shouldn't look at those numbers like that.
Oh, okay. Because, no, I was simply going by what Mr. Javadekar, Information Minister, said. He said every Indian will be vaccinated by December. So
they will be. But
so we were just doing the numbers on the basis of that.
By the end of the year, and it doesn't need to be by the end of the year. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
We still can have phased approach for the vaccination of the entire population.
Okay, but overall, but do tell me how much of a concern is it? Because if we are not able to meet those targets, are we at a risk of running into the third wave?
Look, Vasu, from a third wave, we have to be prepared for it. I mean, there's no way that we can, from what the one lesson that we've all learned from all over the world, including at the moment the UK, which is, having declared openness and so on and so forth, is now beginning to see the, a new wave arising in that country, etc. Japan is another case in point where they've declared an emergency for a month. So the third wave, we have to be all prepared for. Being an economist, I'm more concerned about the economy and the impact of the pandemic on the economy.
Yes.
That balance between lives and livelihood has to be maintained, has to be very carefully monitored, and ensured that we achieve the best balance that we can in the given circumstance. So we have to be prepared for the worst and then continue to hope for the best.
So you're saying we have to be prepared for the third wave, which is fair enough. But at the moment, this time around, we eschewed going in for a national lockdown. Instead, it was left for states and individual municipalities, city municipalities and authorities to enforce localized lockdowns or curfews, whatever you call it. Was that, in hindsight, you think, a correct decision? Because this was what was surprising to a lot of people, that in the first wave, when the virus was far less ferocious, the numbers were less, we did a national lockdown. Second wave, with much higher numbers of virus infections and deaths, we didn't opt for a national lockdown.
I was hoping that you would not be playing this game of, that hindsight and ex ante, etc., because the very people who were critical of the national lockdown have now turned around to say, why not a national lockdown? So let's not play those games.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is that the second wave, one, as you say, took everybody a complete surprise, and the speed at which it gained ground was also quite ferocious. But at the same time, you must remember that India, being as diverse a country as it is, we cannot have, if we can avoid a national situation and can have regional variations to our responses, I think you are much better off than what you would be in a sort of one-size-fits-all.
Okay.
That was required last year to create a national awareness, and that achieved very good results, as numbers show. Because in the absence of which, the things could have been much higher, much worse. So I think these are responses taken on the basis of the data, of the information that's available, with the best intent. And I think that's what we must give the credit for to the government. And the response keeps getting tweaked as situations evolve.
Okay. Let me ask you, though, in conclusion, what is the Rajiv Kumar prescription for getting the economy? I mean, it is still stormy water, so one isn't sure how the ship is going to sail, whether there could be fresh waves and more lockdowns. But as of now, do you think that these packages and schemes that have been announced are enough, or do you think that it is important to consider other interventions to try to cushion the shock of the economic shock, especially on the vulnerable?
I think, as the Honorable Finance Minister said, and you said now, it's always important to listen and to be open to other suggestions. And it's always very important to look at
what would you suggest? What
welfare of the vulnerable?
No. What are specifically some of the measures you would suggest that you think is needed?
That Vasu, you will appreciate, is not something to be discussed on a public platform. We are constantly, discussing. We are watching. We take measures. Measures have been announced in the past, and reform measures have been announced, and others will be announced. That I can assure you. That they will be announced. They are all on the job, and the hope is that to put enough substance, put enough reforms, structural reforms in place, that as the pandemic retreats, our economy will surprise everybody by the strength of its recovery.
Okay, well, it's always good to be optimistic, especially in such difficult times. But at the moment, one has to say that it is looking grim. So let's hope that things start to turn around. But always a pleasure to have you, Rajiv Kumar. Thank you so much for joining me and for agreeing to this conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.